As the comic book medium becomes increasingly more mainstream, people are experimenting with the medium. However, they also don't want to be spending large sums of money to amass all the back issues to complete a particular story. Therefore, people today are turning more and more to graphic novels. Today, we will be talking about graphic novel recommendations. I am Dante D, and in this video, I bring you the top 10 graphic novels of all time. At number 10, we have Superman, the Red Sun. This book here takes the classic American hero of Superman and reimagines him as a Soviet hero. Need we say more? I have to admit, it was really ironic to see Superman, a hero traditionally associated with standing up for truth, justice, and the American way, now standing up for the communist way of life in Soviet Russia. Next, we have Marvel Civil War, which was a huge crossover event in the mid-2000s. This graphic novel here was kind of Marvel's attempt to create a very powerful allegory for post-9/11 America and the security anxieties that existed. I really believe that their attempt was a successful one. In this book, after a huge catastrophe that was caused by mutants, the American government, in an attempt to increase security, starts a mutant registry program. This registry program really creates a divide in the community of mutants and superheroes. So we have a war between those who are in favor of registration and those who are not. This is a very, very interesting read, and I would suggest it to anybody. Next on our list, coming in at number 8, we have Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. And what really makes this book interesting is the artwork. The artwork in this book is just jaw-dropping. It's hand-painted by Alex Ross, and this was a very, very influential and popular story arc in the 1990s. This book starts off with a clash between the heroes of the DC universe. However, as it progresses, there's a very, very interesting twist, and I'm going to leave it up to you to pick up this book to find out what that twist is. Next on our list, coming in at number 7, is FOR Vendetta by Alan Moore, which a lot of you might have seen the movie. This is a dystopian tale about an Orwellian security state and one vigilante's struggle to fight for liberation. This graphic novel here is known not only for its riveting story, but also for introducing that very iconic Guy Fawkes mask into mainstream pop culture. This mask has become so popular in mainstream culture that all of the members of a hacker group called Anonymous, who also have a channel on YouTube, they wear this mask when they appear in videos and in public. Next, coming in at number 6, we have Daredevil Born Again, which was a very iconic and influential story arc from the 1980s by Frank Miller. In this graphic novel here, the Kingpin absolutely destroys everything about Matt Murdock and Daredevil's life. Frank Miller does an absolutely fantastic job crafting a story of Matt Murdock and Daredevil's rise to prominence again. It's a very, very great story. I really suggest you check it out. Coming in at number 5, we have pretty much anything from the Earth 1 series. Earth 1 series is a series of graphic novels that DC Comics has released. They have Wonder Woman Earth 1, they have Batman Earth 1, they have Superman Earth 1. They are all fabulous. My personal favorite, obviously, is Batman Earth 1. They have 2 volumes of Batman Earth 1. And they are absolutely fantastic. They are simply a must-read for any superhero fan or any person who just wants to read a great story. In fact, if any of you out there watch the show Gotham actually kind of takes a little bit from the Batman Earth 1 series and incorporates it into the show. Just a fabulous, fabulous graphic novel. You really got to check it out. Coming in at number 4, we have Mouse Volume 1 and Mouse Volume 2. This series here is a very, very powerful Holocaust tale which features black and white anthropomorphic animals. This is not only a story of the Holocaust, but it also delves into the relationship that the narrator has with his father, and is also a story of survival in the Auschwitz death camps. I cannot stress enough how powerful this graphic novel series is. It actually even won a Pulitzer Prize for how influential and profound it is. Coming in at number 3, we have Batman The Killing Joke, which is by Alan Moore and Brian Bolland. This, even though is number 3 on the list, probably is my personal favorite on the list. This is one of the most iconic graphic novels of the 1980s, and definitely one of the most memorable comic book stories of all time. In fact, it is said that the 1980s Batman movie, which was directed by Tim Burton, is actually loosely based off of this graphic novel here. There's actually a story that after Tim Burton had read this graphic novel, he showed up to a meeting, slapped it down on the table and said, "I want my Batman film to be like this." And up here you can see here Tim Burton says, "I loved The Killing Joke. It's my favorite. It's the first comic I've ever loved." I don't want to get too much into the story with you. I'll kind of have you go discover that for yourself. But this graphic novel here looks at how deranged the Joker really is, and it kind of brushes the surface of his possible origin story. And I say possible because it's explained in the end whether or not that is actually his origin story, but it's just such an interesting read, very, very psychologically rich and entertaining from beginning to end. I think I've read this graphic novel cover to cover probably 6 or 7 times. Coming in at number 2, we have Batman, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. Another story by Frank Miller here, and definitely deserves the number 2 spot. This, again, is one of the most influential comic book stories of the 1980s, and definitely one of the most memorable of all time. This graphic novel here deals with a 55-year-old Batman and his return to the vigilante crime fighting scene. This graphic novel here is very, very dark, but I really think that all modern representations of Batman kind of come one way or another from this story by Frank Miller here. I actually saw this interview with Frank Miller, and he says that it was up to the comic book creators of my generation to give Batman his balls back. And I really think they did it with this graphic novel here. Before this story here came out in the 1980s, Batman was very much associated with camp. Thanks, Adam West. After the Adam West Batman in the 1960s, there were some attempts to bring Batman back to his darker roots, dark as he was in those early Bob Kane, Bill Finger stories. But those attempts, by and large, failed. Coming in at number 1, you probably guessed it, and that is Watchmen, again by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. This rightly deserves the number 1 spot. This is another hugely significant comic book story from the 1980s. I cannot express enough how important this graphic novel here is, not only to the comic book medium, but to literature as a whole. This graphic novel won a Hugo Award. It was in Time magazine's 100 best novels of all time, also the only graphic novel to be on that list. And it's considered to be one of the greatest pieces of literature of the 20th century. This graphic novel here provides very interesting commentary on the superhero genre as a whole, and it really was the first graphic novel to show superheroes as very heavily flawed individuals. The character development in this graphic novel was just outstanding, and it was so captivating from beginning to end. I think that you should read all the graphic novels on today's list, but if there is only one that you were going to pick to read on this list, it should be Watchmen. All these graphic novels here are very, very accessible, and they are sold at a very, very reasonable price. All these graphic novels here would make a perfect gift for that special comic book geek in your life, or just to anybody who enjoys reading in general, even if they're not into comics. That's the one thing I find great about these graphic novels here, is that you don't necessarily have to be a comic book fan to enjoy them. I think these graphic novels here really cater to a larger audience. So those were my comic book recommendations and what I consider to be the top 10 graphic novels of all time. Do you agree with this list? Were there other graphic novels that you feel should have been on this list that weren't? Please let me know in the comments. If you're interested in getting any of these graphic novels that we talked about here today, I've made it very, very easy for you. Check out the description. I provided links to all of the Amazon.com listings for these graphic novels. And once again, if you like this video, please, please, please do not leave without hitting that subscribe button. New videos are published weekly on topics relating to geek culture. Until next time, this is Dante D signing off. Excelsior!